It seems like hype over changing the world is the currency of the tech industry. In recent memory, we've seen companies claim everything is different because of stuff like Bitcoin, the blockchain, non-fungible tokens, NFTs, or virtual reality. You've probably heard of those. You may also have been pretty skeptical about how important these kind of technologies actually are. Very wise. For the most part, you can probably ignore these things and go about your business. You may even dodge a Ponzi scheme or two while you do. The current hype is artificial intelligence, and specifically what is called generative AI. That is, computer programs created using machine learning that are able to produce creative works like text, pictures, music, videos, computer code, and so on. Is this stuff being shoved through the same hype machine as prior tech developments? Absolutely. Is it just another tech invention the business world can ignore? Absolutely not. This one is the real deal. While the true extent of its impact will take some time to sort out, I have no doubt at all that this is going to make waves in how we work and conduct business in Colorado. On the next few installments of the workshop series, we're going to dive into the legal aspects of generative AI. In this first video, I'm going to talk about how the technology works at a high level and why, as a lawyer, I think it is significant for business. In future videos, we'll dive into the likely legality or illegality of generative AI, including how it is trained, and discuss some of the dangers and risks to those who use the technology. Along the way, I'll be frank about addressing some pretty awful hot takes I've seen online from people who want to share their opinions about AI without doing the legal research first. Before getting started, I should reiterate my usual disclaimer. This is not legal advice. I will provide some general information as normal, but since this area of law is brand spanking new, some of what I'm going to tell you is my own conclusion or opinions. It's extremely likely that new cases or even legislation will be coming out that invalidates some of what I'll say. Indeed, I would not be surprised if this video ages the worst of any workshop video I've put together. Remember, we're raising questions here, not giving you answers. And if you need answers, hire an attorney. So, what's the big deal about generative AI? Well, it is able to automate white-collar tasks like writing letters or blog posts, visualizing data, creating clip art, summarizing documents, and other tasks. And importantly, it interfaces with human beings using the same way we interface with each other, language. Generative AI is impressive because it connects instructions in regular old human text to output. Instead of having to learn a programming language, you tell the computer what you want it to do in the same way you'd tell a coworker, and it will do it, maybe, more or less. Sometimes a new, easy-to-use interface is really all it takes to cause a revolution in how we do work. Do you remember the computer mouse? Or graphic interfaces like Windows or Macintosh? If you do, you know how much faster people could work when they were able to more easily interact with the computer, and they didn't have to learn a bunch of keyboard button combinations or DOS code and so on. Being for humans to use is a big deal. The human language interface, I think, is what has caused the massive hype we're currently seeing. Artificial intelligence as a field has been making steady progress for decades. It's been taking over for a long time. You might remember it occasionally making news when Deep Blue was able to beat Garry Kasparov in chess, when AlphaGo was able to beat champions at Go, or when Watson won a game of Jeopardy. You may not have noticed how artificial intelligence techniques were being used in your search engines, your navigation and map programs, your job application reviews, or other things. They learn what you do online, and they give you targeted ads and recommended songs on Spotify. Our AI overlords have been here for a while. Whenever you hear the word algorithms, that's a form of AI. Many of these examples are of a programming technique that is today very closely associated with artificial intelligence, machine learning. To understand generative AI, it's important to know a little bit about this. Now, while the technical details about how this works are beyond this video, very generally, this consists of using clever data structures and mathematics to create software that can do things that we are not smart enough to tell the computer how to do. See, in traditional programming, you sit down and type out explicit instructions you want the computer to execute. Print hello world. If number of eggs is less than 1, order more eggs. Things like that. This kind of instruction-based programming creates software which is, theoretically, understandable to humans, and whose results can be predicted. Machine learning doesn't work like that. Instead, you start from a somewhat arbitrary arrangement of code, and then see how well it does at a particular task. You then see how the code did and adjust it to do better next time. Rinse and repeat an absurdly large number of times. And you can end up with a final result, often called a model, that does a pretty good job at the task you trained it to do. In the case of the current crop of generative AI, the model takes text input, called a prompt, and then spits out a creative work on the other end. The model encodes the relationship between the prompt and the output. It's like a map between the word Boston Terrier and pictures of small black and white dogs with bug eyes, and many other things. Notice that because the program was evolved instead of written out line by line in code, no one actually knows precisely what the model is doing. We know that it's mapping prompts to outputs, sure. We can observe how it behaves from case to case. But you can't predict in advance exactly what the output's going to be. Nor do the creators know what kind of algorithms the model had to stumble into to be good at what it does. The models are generally too small to be just giant statistical tables, and they run too fast for the kind of algorithms humans might think up to accomplish what they do. When it comes to large language models, things get even weirder. It turns out that we humans talk about a lot of things: math, coding, translating languages. And it further turns out that a model that was really only trained to predict human text can end up utilizing this function to do mathematics, write computer code, or translate languages. This kind of emergent behavior, where the model ends up being able to do a task that it was not explicitly trained to do, is actually pretty controversial. Researchers disagree about what this means about the kind of patterns that were grown in the model. Some researchers dismiss large language models as mere mindless parrots, comfortable that the model is just doing some extremely clever statistics. Others claim the model abruptly becomes capable of new tasks, and that this evidences some more complicated behavior. Yet others claim there's nothing abrupt about it, and the model gets better steadily the more language it learns. It's just that we don't notice whether a model can do math until it starts getting the questions right on occasion. And yes, there are even those who are worried that the only way a model could predict language as well as they do is by having figured out how to encode something like what our own brains are doing. Now, from my perspective as a lawyer, I don't have the answers to these kind of questions. If we're creating robot overlords that are going to take over, well, kind of above my pay grade. What I see is the practical use and the practical effect today that these models function like a pocket calculator for writing and art. The calculator, I think, is an excellent way to understand the importance and the disruptive force of generative AI. With a calculator, people going about their daily business don't have to do arithmetic by hand. We still teach it in school, and many people do remember how to do long division throughout their life, believe it or not. I happen to think you should. Math is beautiful, fun, and extremely useful. Nevertheless, I bet some of you have forgotten how to add and subtract fractions, right? Well, no worries, because everyone has access to a calculator. It's even on your computer and your phone. You can automate this process if you forgot how to do it. And even if you do enjoy math, and you do remember how to do it, the computer does it faster. As a lawyer, I will pretty regularly have to crunch numbers for things like loan aging summaries. I don't do those by hand. It would be time-consuming to do this by hand, and I would risk making errors that would be hard to detect. I use a spreadsheet program. Virtually every business does this too. Well, now we have a calculator for memo writing. Well-written prose is a skill. Learning to diagram a sentence, write a 5-paragraph essay, or learning the IRAC format for legal briefing are all skills people have to learn. Taking your ideas and putting them into a well-written text takes effort, just like calculating an aging summary takes effort. But now, with generative AI, you can punch your basic idea and instructions into the word calculator, and the word calculator will handle the mechanics for you. Now, of course, it's not a perfect analogy. A properly functioning calculator won't give you randomly wrong answers. Generative AI can absolutely do that. Early versions of Stable Diffusion, an open-source image generating software, would produce really bizarre pictures that had tremendous trouble with hands. Bing, one of the large language models, made a splash on the internet for getting stuck in strange loops accusing the user of lying about the current date or threatening to sue the user for defamation. Models can hallucinate false information because, after all, they're producing output based only on the language they've seen, not on interaction with the real world. I'll give you some of my own experience. I have asked a large language model to give me summaries and citations to Colorado law on some topics, not connected with actual clients. We'll talk about why later. It usually gets the answer decently right, but sometimes it just makes up a law that doesn't exist. I've seen it mix up state and federal statutes and produce a blended result that isn't correct for either. Generative AI companies are hard at work on these problems, though. Well, the ones who care about accuracy are. Providers can do a variety of things to try to reduce hallucinations. The model can be instructed to use a different tool, like a search engine or a calculator program, to consult before it produces an answer. The inputs and the outputs can be screened to watch for unusual or dangerous language and filter it out separately. The model can also continue training even after deployment, collecting data and ratings from users. Some large language model providers, for example, will use your prompts and responses as a user to train the model further. Image generating models urge their users to rank the images produced so that the model gradually produces better results. You can see this improvement in sharp relief by exploring, for example, the ability to draw hands of an updated model like Midjourney version 5 to the original Stable Diffusion from the fall of 2022. Nowadays, they usually have 5 fingers. Another thing providers are doing to improve the reliability of large language models is to train them further on specific language space. Legal research companies have taken large language models originally trained on the internet and retrained them on just legal opinions, motions, briefs, and so on. This can refine and focus the model to produce results more like the specific kind of knowledge to get more reliable results. So maybe we're really talking here about a moody calculator. All the functions you want are in there. Somewhere inside the calculator's inscrutable model are the instructions to write a legal brief, provide medical advice, adjust an insurance claim, or any number of things you should not do on your own in fields of specialized knowledge. The problem is, how do you ensure the prompt is going to trigger the calculator to go to that specific part of its relationship map and not pollute it with answers from associations it learned from somethingawful.com? Not so easy. But it's worth figuring that out, at least from a productivity perspective. Unlike NFTs, generative AI produces something that has value. We know it has value because we already pay humans to do it. We pay people to write unreliable blocks of text. It's called clickbait. We already pay people to draw images without being too concerned about the details. It's called clip art. And as a lawyer, I'm already busy summarizing large legal documents and transcripts on a regular basis. Generative AI has the capacity to automate this process. Nothing is going to stop companies from exploring ways to use it. And, unlike prior technologies, you don't have to be a technician to use generative AI. It doesn't require engineering, or programming. Every middle manager and business owner can just tell the model what it wants and yell at the model when it's wrong, all in the same language they might use to instruct or abuse an actual employee. Which leads me to my first bad hot take of the video series: the prompt engineer as a new job. There are people out there who reason that any new technology that disrupts old jobs also necessarily creates new ones. I agree. But the jobs that generative AI creates, I think, are going to be on the side of companies figuring out the ways to provide and improve generative AI. Some will say that a new hot job will be the prompt engineer, basically AI whisperers who know the tips and tricks to get the best results out of the AI. Color me skeptical. I do think that being able to use generative AI is probably going to be an asset in white-collar jobs. Sure. But so is knowing how to use Microsoft Word. When is the last time you hired someone to be your Microsoft Word whisperer? You don't do that. I would be extremely surprised if anyone was able to get a long-term job solely for the purpose of helping others interface with generative AI. Instead, I expect the software will manifest just like other software packages do, a skill that supplements others and is used tangentially to the actual work. So, if you hear people trying to sell you something on the basis of the idea that you'll be able to retrain yourself for a career talking to a large language model, maybe be extremely careful and do your homework. Remember, if your only function is to take your boss's human language instructions and provide slightly different language instructions to a computer, that's not a recipe for job security. It's a recipe for your supervisor to remove you from the loop and give the instructions directly to the AI. Now, if you need more proof that this is a big deal, look at what regulators are doing. The European Union has proposed major regulation already called the Artificial Intelligence Act. In May, there were hearings before the United States Senate on possible regulation. And strangely, the hearing involved OpenAI and Microsoft both begging the senators to please regulate the industry. And the senators seemed very open to the idea, since they're still regretting letting social media run wild under Section 203 of the Communications Decency Act. More on that later. This initial discussion has probably triggered a few questions in your human brain about the legality of generative AI. Is it legally acceptable for the models to train on whatever data was found on the internet? Can I get in trouble if I use the model and it does something unexpected? Should I stop hiring entry-level employees and just use generative AI instead? I plan to cover these questions and more in coming videos doing a deeper dive into the different legal aspects of this technology. But instead of leaving you hanging, here's the answers in order. Probably, absolutely, and I wouldn't recommend it. If you want to know why, then make sure you sign up for the next workshop in our workshop series at the link below. Or, if you're the patient type, just wait for the next video upload. Thanks so much for listening to this video in the workshop series. Remember, you can always find us in person doing live workshops with live human beings with actual intelligence anytime you want to by following the link below. See you next time.